I just put your thumb
Hey
up or
guys.
something. Oh,
Hey guys, welcome back to Now That's Debatable. This is your host, Fantastic Facade. Joining with me, as usual, is Triboulet the Humanist. We do want to give a special shout out to Relic Media for keeping us alive and helping us to support throughout the year. And we're coming back with Season 3. This is going to be our first episode of Season 3. Featuring a very special guest that we have seen many debates of, and we follow the YouTube channel personally and on our main page. Godless Engineer is going to be joining us for a conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and get us over to our faces on screen, and we're going to take this thing right off. How's everybody doing today, guys?
doing well. Give me your 1 second so I can just share this to one spot.
That's
Real
fine.
quick.
No one cares what you have to say in this moment. It's
Okay.
all up to our guest.
Our
guest,
my bad.
as usual, gets the first and last segment of the show. Godless Engineer, is there anything you want to say on the front end or plug or kind of get out of the way before we get started? Anything that you want to just kind of get out there? Now's the chance. The floor is yours, and then we'll kick off this discussion on Anarchy.
Okay. Yeah. So, I'm just, I'm Godless Engineer. I've got a YouTube channel, and all the other social medias. If people care about other social medias, I'm just always Godless Engineer everywhere. But, over on my channel, I do a bunch of videos on the topic of atheism, as well as like separation of church and state issues, basically politics and religion. And atheism, and where all those things kind of intersect with each other. So I've got a pretty broad range of stuff, which I've been really heavily focused on the atheism and religion aspect of it here recently, but I'm trying to get back into like looking at some evolution topics and some like politics stuff. So trying to do all that. We normally have like a full load of videos every single week, like just about 5 days a week or so. That we have videos going out, and like I've got a clips channel where I'm posting up old clips from old videos and videos that have already been on the channel for like people that like short, hyper specific topic sort of videos. So I'm interested in learning tonight. Like I've been doing tons of research today about like anarchist theory, I guess, and really kind of I've got a lot of questions, so I'm expecting those to get answered tonight. But
Okay. Maybe.
yeah, maybe.
Let's see. Yeah. So like well, I'll tell you this. Anarchism and atheism, they have a lot in common, mostly in the fact that they tend to be misunderstood by people outside of the circle. In particular, so like when somebody find out you're an atheist, they tend to attach all of these isms to you. They say social Darwinism, you're metaphysical materialist, you're a communist, like all of these isms that may or may not represent your position, but it has nothing to do with atheism. So like with anarchy, people tend to have this picture in his mind. There's like the globe is divided up into different wards, and a warlord is running all of that, and it's just pillage, rape, murder, just pure carnage, right? And so while that is consistent with anarchy, that is not what most people are talking about when describing anarchists. It's especially not me, because so I'm an anarchist not because of pragmatic reasons, not because I think that society will be best off without government, but like it's more of a principled reason, and that is I'm a voluntarist. So that means that any sort of association between or among humans, it ought to be voluntary. You need consent, right? So like if I want to touch your person, I need your consent, or your property, your consent. Like this, and the reason I need your consent is because it's your stuff, right? So since it's yours, part of property is the ability to decide who has access to it, right? So that's the essence of it. And so when we talk
So,
about,
sorry, I had something weird
okay.
going off around me. I didn't want you to think I wasn't listening.
Okay, yeah. So, so that is the essence of property. So since what's mine belongs to me, I get to decide who uses it, who has access to it, who gets to make the rules over it, and that's including like my house, my car, also like my body. All right, I can only give you permission to use it. No one else can do that for me. All right.
Mm.
So let's say this. Let's say I have a house, right? And you want to come and take it without my consent. That's just a theft, right?
Okay.
Right. So, and let's say you and Facade get together and you want to take my house. It's still a theft, even though there's more of you. Let's say you and 1 million people get together and decide you want to take my stuff. It is still a theft. It doesn't change that, because since it's my property, you don't have the authority to come and take it because you don't know.
I mean, if I can interrupt, it's only your property if there's like an agreement about how property rights work, right? Like you have to be on the same page with somebody else first in order to agree that it's your property. Like there's I guess my point is like there's no intrinsic property to some inanimate object or something.
No, it's not. It's not
my
intrinsic.
Property.
It's not intrinsic, but I wouldn't say you have to be in agreement. Like, because I mean, I don't like, we don't have to be in agreement on who has access to your body, which belongs to you. Like,
I mean, for that particular situation, I guess I can understand your point, but I guess I'm thinking more of like other physical property other than yourself. Like, you were using the house analogy a minute ago. Like, it's only your house if there's an established agreement that it's your house. If we lived in a society where it's like, oh no, that's my house. Like, regardless of what you think about it, if the understanding is I don't know what kind of understanding would produce this situation, but since we're just being hypothetical here, let's say that there's this situation where now it becomes my house, and see, I have this understanding that it's my house, you have this understanding that it's your house.
Yeah.
And so there's a disagreement there.
Definitely, there definitely has to be a mutual understanding of property rights, but and I guess like on who owns what, sure. But if we assume that, let's say that for the scenario, there's a house, we agree that is mine, right?
Okay.
So no one would have the authority to take that from me.
I mean, I guess I would. Well, I mean, I guess I would have to know like how that got established. Like how is it established that nobody has the authority to take it from you? Like,
well, so I mean, I would establish it just by like property rights, which is what is the foundation of just like bodily autonomy. Like, if we throw out property rights, then anybody can just morally do whatever they want to anybody. Like, I'm not talking about physical capability. I'm talking about they could morally do whatever they want, right? Because it just doesn't belong to anything. Doesn't belong to anyone, right? So I could be like, oh, your arm, nice arm. I slice it off. It's my arm now. So like so if we throw out property rights, we throw out bodily autonomy. So that's why I kind of hold it sacred. If I don't have it's something that I kind of just presuppose, because like it's not intrinsic. Like there's nothing intrinsic about this ligament that's attached to me that makes it mine. But it's just something that's close.
You understand that still requires like other people to recognize your understanding of property rights. So I mean, my question in the context of anarchy would be, who's there to enforce this idea of property rights? Or is it just like based on cooperation between people? Because cooperation between people is like herding cats. It's just it's incredibly difficult and fairly near to impossible like without some kind of organized like manner about it, you know.
Mhm.
So I mean, I guess I'm just wondering, like, who's enforcing the idea of property rights? Who in this community or society would be the one to hold people accountable if they violate these property rights?
Well, sure. So did when we talk about anarchy, it doesn't mean no rules. It means no rulers, right?
So,
and so that means
while
that
you're at that, let me
yeah.
interject. While you're at
Okay.
it, because you're doing what one of the comments requested is, you're defining a little bit of anarchy and how you're using it. So Zach in the comments asked, so the term anarchy is a colloquialism that you use to describe a set of ideas rather than the literal definition. Is that correct? Would you say that you're using anarchy as a colloquial way to describe your ideas rather than its literal definition?
Yeah, I mean, so my understanding, the literal definition of the word means no rulers. So it doesn't mean no rules. So like and as an
Well, right.
as a ruler, I mean, I didn't look into what the definition of what a ruler would be, but for me, like a ruler would be like a government. He gets to demark his area, and he gets to make the rules over it, whether he owns the property or not. Like, for instance, like I live in the United States, right? I own a house, I own the property, but the United States government gets to make rules over my property despite them not having any ownership over it. So that's what we're talking about. So,
so my question was with that in mind. Like, you know, I'm not saying that there are no rules. Like, that wasn't my point. Like, obviously,
I know.
There would be rules. My question is who is there to enforce the rules? Like, how? I guess that's one of my big hangups is in an anarchist community or society. Yeah, how would the rules be enforced? And then, you know, after that, just something to think about in the future of our conversation here. How do the rules get made, like in that kind of society?
Gotcha. So, well, the rules get made by people, right? So it's let's say we're on an island together and we both land at the same time. There's no land. I mean, there's no authority to decide who gets what. So how are we going to divvy it up, right? You're not going to have to come together and have a mutual understanding and an agreement of how this works. What government would do would be like a third party who gets to force his will on both of us.
Well, no, I disagree with the analogy. Sorry for interrupting, but I disagree with the analogy here, because if you got two people that land on an island, right? And then if you want to put this in the context of the government, the people that landed on the island would create this system of government to govern how they lived. And so it would have like rules and everything like that. Like,
what about the people that don't agree to that system?
I mean, in that particular analogy, it's just the two of you. So I'm guessing y'all would hash that out in some kind of way.
Well, let's say let's change up the scenario, right? So let's say there are 100 people land on an island all at the same time, right?
Okay.
And so they're trying to figure out how to divvy up their land, right?
Okay.
So let's say 99 of them get to decide that they want to make a government and force their will on the one. Like, would that be moral?
I mean, that's a little too nondescript for me to say. It, like, for instance, if the government, if this system that they were suggesting, or this action that they were suggesting, was like, oh, we should all get vaccinated, and it's like there's one person that doesn't want to get vaccinated, but you know, if if that one person isn't vaccinated, then it can affect the entire group or something like that, something of that nature. Then I mean, I think that the more moral action would be to get that person vaccinated. As far as like 100 people landing on an island, 99 of them agreeing to make a government, I don't see how, like, even in an anarchist sort of society there, that seems to be like the making of a government
can I
would
tell
be
you my?
the consensus of the majority.
I'll tell you my principal hang up. So there are certain things that the government supposedly has a right to do that no individual ever could. So for instance, like here in Virginia, there's something called we have these property taxes. Whereas even after you own your home, you have to continue to pay property taxes. And if you fail to pay those taxes, they'll come and take your home even after you've paid it off, and now that is yours, right? So if an individual or a group of individuals that weren't government came and made this rule over me, like we would just all recognize this as extortion. This would be immoral. Somehow government gets the permission to do this. So the voluntarists like me, what we wonder is, if the government gets this authority from the people, but none of the people have the authority to do that, how could they delegate this authority to the government? How could they delegate authority that they don't have?
Well, so could you repeat this authority that only the government has again? Sorry, my headphones.
Oh, yeah, that's all good. So let's say like for instance, like property taxes. Like in Virginia,
Okay.
there's property taxes. So like I buy a home and I own it. Like let's say I completely paid it off, it's mine. I have to continue to pay taxes on that every year. And if I don't, the government will come and take it.
Right.
So yeah.
Do you know what your property taxes are used for generally?
Oh, I mean, public schools generally.
Okay, yeah. Let's hold on. Let's go down this route of property taxes. So let's say in this anarchist society there are no property taxes. You buy a home, you own a home, you don't have to pay tax on the home and everything like that. So what's the solution for public education? Because from my research. Well, hold on. From my research today, one of the essential aspects of an anarchist society is education. You have to educate your population. So what is the anarchist solution to public education or education in general? Like, how do you fund it? How do you do all of that kind of stuff? Like, how is that accomplished in an anarchist society?
So, well, I mean, there's several ways that could be done. I mean, you could literally just rely on capitalism and just make it a business. That could be a way that is done. Communities could do it on their own, like churches. Like, I mean, although I'm an atheist, but like for the longest time, churches they took charge of education, even when there wasn't a government involved. So like there's not a one specific anarchist solution to it. Just like and to be very, very clear, like I'm a voluntarist first. The reason I'm opposed to government is because I think any sort of association needs to be voluntary. So there's not any particular voluntarist solution to education. As long as it's consensual, then it's moral.
So I mean, do you think that children should be given a choice as to whether or not they like go to school?
No. So with children, it's a little different, because with children, like over a child, I'm the child steward, right? So I get to I can make decisions on behalf of them. Kind of like I don't ask my daughter's permission to change her diaper or anything like that.
Right. But then shift it to the parents. If the parents don't want their children in school, should they be given the option to not educate their children?
Well, the parent could, if the parent doesn't want to educate their child, sure. But that doesn't mean the child can't be educated. If the child wants to leave and get an education, they could definitely do that.
Well, but I mean, if the child can't make those kind of decisions for themselves and they're relying on their parents, then how are they going to leave their parents in order to get an education?
Yeah, well, I mean, it would vary. Like, so we're like really broad here. I mean, maybe they could go with an uncle. I mean, like, not sure. So like, there's different ways that could happen. I mean, I could throw it back at you. Well, what do we do if the government decides that they don't want certain people to be educated? Because that has happened. Like,
that has happened.
Like, just think about like 200 years ago. To 200 years ago, they were telling black people they could not be educated. So like, what do you do?
Well, yeah, and I mean, if you go center that, there's segregation, and me being from Alabama,
Government.
that's
Yeah.
pretty bad. Well, I mean, that was government that did do the segregation, but it was also the government that did the desegregation. Now, the government officials, they had to be forced into doing it. And
the government fixed the problem that they themselves created. There wouldn't have been a Jim Crow.
No, you see, but I don't see it as it's like that's a problem that the government necessarily created. It's a problem that people created, and then other people stepped in and fixed the problem. Because that, like down here in Alabama, you had the state, like after the desegregation laws and everything that were passed, Alabama didn't recognize those laws. Like we were like, no, we're not desegregating. We're not doing that. And so they chose to not follow the federal government's laws, which, I mean, if you had somebody that wanted
federal
to
state
bring
government,
that up,
I'm against both. I said federal state government, like I'm against both. I just recognize it as this is just the involuntary relationship that I'm forced into. Tell me, how much research have you done to like the antebellum South, like right after the Civil War?
I mean, I guess I've got enough of an education to like get by. Like I haven't actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally random. It's totally random. Yeah, I mean, like I wasn't like trying to quiz you about it, but so like right after the Civil War, so a lot of those races in the South, what they hoped was that the whites would, on their own volition, segregate themselves from blacks in all different walks of life, like economically, religiously, socially, etc. And it just failed to happen. It just wasn't going on, right? Because race matters, but money mattered more, and so people was making a profit from and with these economically cooperating with blacks. So it just didn't work. That's why the black codes came in, right? Supreme Court strikes that down, and they implement Jim Crow. This was a creation of the government. If the government just stayed out of it, people would have naturally assimilated together. This was total government.
You see, but coming from a very deep South state, I mean, I don't see how. I really don't see how they would have just naturally done it.
They did. Well, that's exactly what was happening. That's why they implemented black codes, which eventually failed, and then Jim Crow afterwards. Because
the Jim Crow laws, they just reinforced what people were already doing. It's not like the Jim Crow laws were made and then all of a sudden everybody became racist and started segregating shit. They were already doing it, so they were just allowed to continue to do it.
No, these Jim Crow laws, it was forced segregation on people. So like you had, for instance, like let's say like you're running pre Brown versus Board of Education. Let's say you wanted to have blacks and whites learn together in a school system, right? I'm sure like you'd support that, right?
Of course I would support it.
Under their system, you couldn't do that.
But my point is
stops you.
Right. Well, my point is that that in the South, like Alabama, they were already doing the segregating. Like they're like the racism was already there. The hatred was already there.
True. So what I'm saying is, like, I'm not saying getting rid of government will get rid of racism, but the government is what empowered the racism. Like, I have a friend of mine that I grew up with. I started in kindergarten with him, graduated all the way to high school with him, right? And despite us playing together and talking like almost every day, I was never allowed to go to his house because like his dad was like just a racist, right? And I never been to his house my entire like 13 years of going to school with him. Despite despite how racist his dad was, he had no power over me. Why? Because like he didn't have access to a government that could actually restrict my behavior. He could think thoughts and think bad things and say bad words about me, but it wouldn't affect my life, right? If he had the power of government over me, which is what was going on, and right at the antebellum South, now all of a sudden you can actually oppress people. You can force people to go to certain neighborhoods, force them to go to certain schools, force them to choose particular jobs. So I'm not saying the racism will go away, but without government, it's not going to have any teeth. And on top of that, when you're relying on the free market, which was going on, right, before the black codes was coming in, not only are you going to miss out on opportunities by being racist, but you're going to have to compete with people who aren't. For instance, like racism, like it has a price, and it's not an investment. It's just the bill that gets more and more expensive the longer you go. Think about the general manager for the Redskins, right? During the 70s, like he was like super racist. He didn't want any blacks on his team, and so he was just skipping over the black athletes. And what started happening? He had to compete with other teams who were recruiting blacks, and so he limited his pool. And so because he wanted to stay competitive, he had to open up.
Okay. And you think that on an anarchist society that wouldn't have happened, like segregation and the mistreatment of Black Americans wouldn't have happened?
No, definitely, like people are going to be mistreated and stuff, but you wouldn't have Jim Crow without government. You wouldn't have black coats without government. You would slavery.
So segregation wouldn't exist.
That was government
if we were anarchists.
So it's like people can tend to naturally segregate themselves, and if that's what they want to do, that's totally fine. But the problem that I mainly have with is that when they use the government to start oppressing other people. Like, so if I decide that I don't want to associate with you anymore, you don't want to associate with me, that's totally fine. But then when I start using a third party to limit the things that you can do, that's when it becomes very problematic, right? Like, well, I mean,
doesn't anarchy suffer from this same thing? Because from what I gathered today in my research, in an anarchist society, there's direct democracy, so that means everybody gets a vote, and no.
Done. So
okay,
yeah. So that's what the guy he called into the line, and so when he was describing democracy, he was using it in a very esoteric way that a lot of like people in the voluntarist anarchist community understands. When he was talking about democracy, he was talking about like your actions. So for instance, like if you want to support Chick-fil-A, you go to Chick-fil-A and you buy a sandwich from them. So you're like in a way voting for them to stay in business, right? So that's what he was talking about. You're voting with your actions. This isn't the same process that would happen in some state where you're voting on a candidate or voting on a particular referendum or anything like that. So the democracy is where the majority gets the rule, right? That is coercive.
Right.
51% makes the rule for 49. I don't care if it's 99%. They don't get to make rules for the for that 1%.
So in your interpretation of anarchy, because there are many different. From what I can tell in my research, there's many different, theories, anarchist theories. But how? So like in the instance of segregation in the South, let's say Alabama was an anarchist state, right? And so how would that be determined? Like, how would it be determined whether or not there were segregated bathrooms?
Oh, so that would be based on the individual. So
if let me throw a specific example. So if I'm a shop owner and I decide that my shop is only for white people, it would be okay for me to put up a sign that says no coloreds allowed. So,
all right. So when you said okay, let me be very specific. So how I want to phrase this. All right. So I'm not endorsing the racism. I'm not saying I approve of it or this is moral. What I'm saying is, since it's your property, you'd have a right to make that immoral decision. So because what you can do, you can say, follow my rules or you can't come into my house. What you cannot do, which is what the government does, is follow my rules or you can't go into your house. The first example is a perfectly legitimate exercise of property rights because it's mine. I get to restrict who gets to use it, but I can't say follow my rules or you can't use your stuff. That is what government says.
But I feel like that doesn't really answer my question, or maybe I'm just not understanding the answer, because like in an anarchist society, like that would be perfectly fine in an
Well,
anarchist society in your
yeah,
in your
so if he wanted, so if a shop owner was like super racist and he like, I don't care if it's gonna hurt my business or not, I don't want blacks at my restaurant. So yeah, he could do that. But
okay. If in an anarchist Alabama state, if the state said, if they all agreed in some kind of way, I'm not exactly sure how you would, how in your particular view of anarchy this
they
would
could,
work.
so they couldn't agree. So that's the thing, they couldn't agree and to say, so like me, so all of Alabama, let's say you had a shop, right? And you had
Can I
a bake
finish?
shop. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just gonna say, what if in all of Alabama, every white citizen in Alabama decided, black people can't own businesses and black people can't use our businesses. Like if everybody in Alabama agreed about that, said, minus black people, and they wanted to force all of the black people out of Alabama, is that a conceivable course of action if Alabama was an anarchist state?
Nah, it would need a government to be able to do that. Only a government. So the conditions that you just described, you say like tell them so black, they want to decide that blacks can't own property, right? And tell them that they have to
I
leave.
said own businesses.
Well, yeah, own a business, right? So whatever it is, so the business is still your property. So that's what government like literally did. It actually did do that. Like, this isn't even an analogy, right? So in an anarchist society, couldn't do that. The white people could get together and decide we don't want to allow blacks at our business, right, on our property, but they couldn't tell blacks you can't own your stuff. That's what they couldn't do.
So here's how I see that going, especially here in anarchist Alabama that we're hypothetically constructing here, is that you've got all these racists in Alabama, which is pretty much 100% of Alabama. Prior to the civil rights movement, even during the civil rights movement, it seems like sometimes. But so everybody doesn't like black people. And a black person sets up a shop, like they start a business, and then all of the white people in the town firebomb that business.
Yeah. So remember, like they're immoral. They're immoral.
That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Moral, immoral. It doesn't matter.
Are you asking about how does he protect his business?
Well, I'm asking, like, is it like in an anarchist society, is this a course of action that could conceivably take place with potentially no repercussions and no way to protect the minority in that particular community or society? Like, it kind of seems like to me, you have this potential for cultivating an entire state full of racists.
Just think about what you're describing literally did happen with government. So what happens when the white people take over government? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So like this isn't a problem with anarchy. This is a problem with people. Like whether or not there's a government or not. Like, yes, that can happen. And like that did happen with government. Somebody get a business. Like you heard about like what happened down in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? The Black Wall Street and all that type of stuff. Yeah. So like the government just sat there and just let it happen. And a lot of times it was police officers that were involved that let it happen.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that like government at that time was any better, at preventing these things. But when I'm speaking about this kind of stuff, I'm thinking about like in the future. Like back then, yeah, government was shit. It was definitely not of an egalitarian mindset. Well, yeah, in some respects, I agree the government's still shit. But if you transfer that, like if you take that through time. I mean, in Alabama, still an anarchist state. I mean, you have things now that are like you have an all-white Alabama, and that entire state has done things that are just not egalitarian, but it's because the majority of people in that state have decided this is how it's going to be.
Yeah, so that is that they're essentially acting in the role of government. Right, so that is like a democracy, pretty much, where the majority is making the rules for everybody else, and that's what I'm totally against. You
So in the firebomb example that we were talking about, how would people be held accountable for their immoral actions? Let's say, like for the action of firebombing the black business,
Mhm.
how would anybody hold them accountable? Now, this isn't to say, oh, I think the government at that time would definitely hold them accountable or anything. I'm just saying, like in this proposed anarchist state, would there be any accountability? Because like now, like in current government now, there's a way to hold people accountable for that. And
Sometimes I don't know if you've been keeping up with some of the drownings that happen overseas, like a lot of extrajudicial killings that's been happening. No oversight. That's government.
well, I mean, I'm talking
So
about
like,
within the continental United States, like within the United States, like society is what I'm talking about. Like,
so
I mean, I
for
have my problems with the whole drone thing as well, but
yeah,
I mean, I'm just talking about like it. Like currently in our government, you can't go and firebomb a place and not be held accountable
yeah.
unless there's like some kind of corruption going on with the government and everything like that. The ideal solution for it is that the government holds people accountable for their actions that violate these rules and laws that we have made for our society. And in an anarchist kind of situation, I don't see any way of mitigating that or any way of holding people accountable for the things that they do. Are you suggesting that people shouldn't be held accountable for the things that they do?
Oh no, not at all. So like, because like the scenario you're describing, like that's what I wonder. Like you're describing a scenario: black guy starts a business, white people come and firebomb it, right?
Mhm.
Like, what if government does that? There is no recourse. So
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean,
you're in the same situation, and there have been instances when the government actually was doing that. So, but let's say this. So, what in our society right now? Fortunately, we live in a country where people come and just firebomb into business without any sort of repercussions. It's just kind of inconceivable, especially if they were just doing it just because it was race.
it's
So,
inconceivable in an anarchist society, or
no, I'm saying in the United States.
oh, okay, okay.
You wouldn't think that has happened. You wouldn't think that could happen today, right? You wouldn't think, right? Even though it definitely happens in the past, it happens all over the world. We look about what's happening to the Chinese and Malaysia and stuff, like just mistreatment, right? Just ethnic groups just get the short end of the stick all the time. So like, presumably, what will protect you like is the government, right? In the form of police, et cetera, right? So like you value the protection and security you get from police.
I mean, I don't think the police are protecting me, but
Okay.
I
Well,
value I value enforcement of the law, and I don't want anybody to think that I think that like that our government has ever been perfect or is ever ideal. I think that government in the way that we govern ourselves as a society is constantly changing, supposed to constantly progressing to be better. Well, that's debatable now, of course, but I'm just saying I don't want it to seem like I'm saying that like government is the government that we have now or in the past has ever been perfect. I don't think that it has been.
Yeah, I don't think you said that. Yeah.
Okay. I just I think that that government provides a way that minorities can be protected and all this other stuff, even if that hasn't always happened and maybe will never happen as in an ideal sense. But I think that it has more mechanisms and better ways to protect people and provide an egalitarian society than not having it. So, anyways, go ahead.
Let me steal man if I can for a second by interpreting some of the comments, because the comments have been going off. Really appreciate it. I've been trying to keep up with it. I switched to my personal account so I can give a little bit of a longer response because the software we use is a little limited. But just to kind of reiterate some of the things that have been said and kind of steel man Godless Engineer here, it looks like the comments kind of have the same question and same line of questioning when it comes to what if people kind of get together on their own and say that, we're not going to, let black people establish businesses in our neighborhood. Couldn't white people in an anarchist society just say, like, we're not going to let you do that, even though there's no government. Like we're just all in agreement that if you set up your own grocery store, or
We're gonna tear it down.
We're not going to tear it down. We're just never going to shop there. And since we make up 99%, you're never going to make a profit. You're going to go out of business, right? And we're going to do things intentionally to manipulate the market to ensure that you go out of business, to ensure that you can't afford a house in the state that we live in, to ensure that we can get it to a society of all of our kindred spirits that don't like black people.
Sure.
So what's something that would prevent them from doing that? Since we in an anarchist society, we don't have things like police, and then
you wouldn't
to kind of go upon that a little bit more in this comment is just to say
can I answer that before you go to the next comment? Can I answer this?
It was just building on that, but sure, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So you're talking about like in a society, there's a majority of white people. They have a super majority, and they decide that it's a black owner who owns a business. They're just not going to shop there, right? And
yeah, I mean, you can do that in the state that I live in, or in a lot of states near me, because it's just a very predominantly white environment.
Okay, all right. So I got to emphasize this point. Putting a government there doesn't fix it, because those white people who don't shop at the business, they're just going to take the government and then use the laws to again just persecute the black business. So it doesn't solve it.
Just take it over. So like,
I'm not
promoting a federal government here. I'm just saying it does solve that problem. I'm not saying it's a perfect solution.
So you're saying the answer is to get a larger government to have to control that?
I'm not saying that's a perfect solution. I'm just saying it does exactly do what you just said it doesn't. A federal government keeps people in the state that I live in from doing things like blocking black people from establishing businesses and completely overrunning them.
No, well, you didn't say federal. We weren't talking about federal and state governments here. I just said, like, if we just throw a government in, the people would. Well, if there's a super majority within the area, and you put a government there, then they're going to run that government. Now you're adding an extra criteria. There's a larger government, and there's another multicultural super majority that can control them. Right. Well, if that's the case, then he can just go over there and he'll be fine, or they can support his business. You don't need government for this.
If I can point, why can't that person establish and live where they want to live? Like if I want to live somewhere, like why should I be forced to move somewhere else because the people around me hate my guts or hate the color of my skin or disagree with me or are literally doing everything they can to keep me from living a life like a life.
So you're not.
You're saying like hold
on. Wait a minute.
Like, if you don't like the U.S., just leave.
Well, no. I didn't say if you don't like the U.S., just leave.
No, that's the akin statement to what you're saying is if they don't like this situation, we can just go over here.
That's not the scenario at all. So like, okay. So you just said
I'm sorry to interrupt here, but I feel like the previous answer didn't really answer it. I mean, I feel like what you said was basically that our government's not perfect. That can still happen under this government, but you didn't really provide an answer to how does anarchy solve this issue?
Yeah, anarchy. So anarchy doesn't solve everything. So like, it is not. I'm not saying this is a utopia. All our problems go away. There, murder, rape, all kinds of things that happen with government can still happen without government. So like what happens if you're walking down an alley? You're walking down an alley in an anarchist society. Somebody beats you up and steals all your shit, and you don't know who it was. Well, like I mean, you're out of luck. So like, yes, there's bad things that can happen. There will be situations where there is just no remedy. But compare
that. So if you compare that to like a government, a government entity, like, and when we're talking about the United States government, I feel like it should automatically be assumed that we're talking about, there's local government, there's state government, and then there's federal government.
Well, I'm talking
three
about
levels of government there.
I'm talking about government in general.
I know you're talking about government in general, gotcha. but there's checks in, like, between the federal, state, and local, like there's checks and balances that run, and so like. That's why, like, if you have a certain city that's running things a bit shady, there are pathways and alternatives to where you can rectify the shadiness, right? Yep. And so, in the situation that you brought up with the walking down the alley and having somebody steal your shit and all that other kind of stuff, I mean, in anarchy, you are just shit out of luck, right? but there is a possibility in the government on the government side of things for you to get repercussion for it, like either compensation or get your shit
Unless
back
the
or something like
government
that.
is in on it. But like in an anarchist
Well,
society, there's a possibility that people could there's a recourse for me,
do,
right?
yeah,
Maybe
but
there's
do you
some
deny
other
that there's a
people who
possibility?
yeah, say it again.
But I mean, are you denying that course of action is possible in a society run by government?
I was going to say either one of those is a possibility. So like whether there's a government or not, there's a possibility for that action could be rectified as much as physically possible.
It like in anarchy, you're saying, or in government?
Well, yeah, you can have So like if in either way, I said yes to either or question. So like so in anarchy, sure, it could happen voluntarily, right? So you could have a larger group that come out and to protect that black business or and to support them or do whatever, or maybe he wants it. I mean, there's not a specific anarchist solution to that or voluntary solution. Longest is voluntary. And in the government, and on the government side, maybe the government, if it's not dirty and corrupt and ruled by the majority that bombed the business in the first place, maybe then it could also help. But wouldn't
you
safety net
agree? Well, I mean, wouldn't you agree that in the modern government that we have, it's far more likely that if a black business is firebombed, that the people that firebombed it potentially will be held accountable.
Then within an anarchist society?
Well, I mean, then in an anarchist society, I was just...
well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like I was saying, like, fortunately, we live in their government now, whereas people firebombing the business just because it's black owned, and then there's no repercussions afterwards. Fortunately, that is like inconceivable.
Well,
it's highly unlikely that it would happen.
I kind of feel like you're comparing the worst possible outcome for our current government to, I guess, maybe either a run-of-the-mill outcome or a best-case scenario outcome for an anarchist society. So I kind of feel like we're kind of not really comparing the two systems all that well.
So maybe this comment will help, and if you could, says, we have a comment from Hoosier. It says, they say you're still not answering the questions. What issues, and maybe we could give some specific examples, would be solved or at least better without the government? So in an anarchist society, what issues specifically would be better or solved? What issues would you solve, or what issues would become better for the average person?
All right,
by moving to an anarchist society versus a government entity society.
Well, sure. So
I guess maybe like our current society.
Well, yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. So, okay, let's say, like right now we're running a business together. We're running a business together, and we have this we have this falling out, and we start suing each other. Right? You're far more wealthy than I am, right? And so you're able to bribe the judge. Now, under the government, whether I like it or not, I have to use that judicial system. Like, that's just the way it is. With an anarchist society, we have a private arbitrator. So if this arbitrator gets caught cooking the books in your favor because you bribed them, he's going to ruin his business, right? So he has an incentive he has a financial incentive to be objective. I can just say, I don't want to use that guy. I can use a private.
So I feel like there's incentive for the judge to not be bribed, though. Like, I mean, if the judge is going to take a bribe, he can go to jail.
Yeah, he could, but if the government, if the government is corrupt enough where that's just okay for them, then that protection isn't going to be there. And because you're limiting this to the United States. Me and Facade, we've been to a lot of places together. We went to a country, I don't want to say where for security reasons, but we went to a country a few years ago.
Please
don't
say where. I'm undergoing a security clearance background.
Okay.
Right now.
Yeah.
We do not need to get involved.
All right. So all right. So we visited this country. It's far from here, and we were trying to get our visas to get in. They just wouldn't stamp us. So you know what they wanted? A bribe. Like, it is that corrupt. We had to bribe them, and it was just expected. So what I'm saying is, like, if there's a government that is corrupt enough to do that, and they're all over the place, like the United States is kind of an exception here. Corruption is really bad, right? It's where it's just expected. That government is your only recourse. You have to use him whether you're corrupt or not, right? And anarchists
mention this. There is private arbitration in.
Yeah, there is.
Like, you can undoubtedly go to an arbitration.
You can. But I mean, my point.
Yes, again.
I mean, but again, I feel like you're focusing on the worst possible case scenario for government.
Well, no, I was just
hierarchical control.
I mean, I pointed that out because, like, somebody in the comment just asked for one specific example that could be better without a government, and I was just throwing that out.
Like, but just to play devil's advocate, and maybe steel man their question is, in an anarchist society, the worst possible outcome is that everybody's in on it but you, and there's nothing anyone can do.
Yeah,
I mean, at least the
government wouldn't fix that.
Government is there's checks and balances. They may be damaged.
No,
but
in your
it seems like in an
scenario,
anarchist society, like, we could literally just keep spinning the wheel until nothing happens.
In your scenario, you said everybody's in on it but you.
Well,
how would the government fix that? No, the government's run by the people. So the judges, the president, the police officers, they're all in on it. You're screwed. The government doesn't fix that in your scenario.
In the anarchist society, if everybody's in on it but you, that is the worst possible outcome. In a government system,
that can happen with
especially
government.
The one in the United States, there's reasons that, like, judges can't get assigned to your case.
You said if everybody's in on it but you.
In your anarchist society, you're not listening.
And in your government, everybody's in on it but you. That doesn't change it. The co-hosts are arguing.
There's checks and balances.
Let
me finish.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
You've been talking the whole time.
In
the government, there's checks and balances to keep judges from doing
you're both
things like they're just doing.
I'm the one anarchist here. But
yeah,
okay, go ahead.
And you can get out-talked because it's my show too. I came up with it.
All right, go ahead.
So, in the government, at least in the modern American government, there are checks and balances in place. And I'm not saying they're not damaged. I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm saying there are situations in place to keep people from, like, jurors being able to speak on your behalf if they have unbridled racism. In your case, given that you're black, if you were in my neighborhood, they couldn't speak if they were an obvious racist, and they called forth and they were like, yeah, I'm straight up racist, I'm going to send this guy to prison. Well, that's not something that you can do in an anarchist society, right? It's all voluntary based, right?
Wait, so yeah, you can totally do that. There's no reason why you couldn't have jurors in an anarchist.
There's no government, so there's no people getting together to do this.
Yes, you could.
Sure,
that's what I'm saying. Like, you're not getting
a government in a courtroom in order to do what we're
no.
So, like,
no. If we want to talk about how the criminal justice system could work without in an anarchist society, we can go there. But there's no reason why you couldn't have it.
You specifically brought up an instance of a judge, right? And you're saying in the instance of here, a judge could be bribed, right? And in that case, you're right. In the current American government system, a judge could be bribed by a very rich person, right? It's totally possible. I'm not saying there's not flaws. But what I'm saying is the judge does have the incentive to either report donations or potentially face consequences, like what's currently going on in the U.S. government system and the U.S. Supreme Court.
That wasn't so like having an incentive.
Like, in an anarchist society, you have the same problem, but for everyone.
You're missing the crux of my point. So, like, my argument wasn't that the judge does or does not have an incentive to not be bribed. My point was, in an anarchist society, you have a choice. So if this judge is corrupt or arbitrator is corrupt, like, if in an anarchist society, I can just go to someone else. If the judge is corrupt, I am stuck. I have to use that system. That was the point I was trying to make.
You can petition to get your case moved to a different jurisdiction. You can petition to have a judge assigned to you separately. Yes.
The judge can say no. But no, the judge can say no.
The judge doesn't get to decide that. It goes before the Supreme Court.
No, it doesn't. That's not how that works.
So hold on.
No. The Seventh Amendment is very clear, right? trial happens in its jurisdiction where it's committed.
You can get your case removed for jurisprudence. You can get a different
For
judge
jurisprudence,
assigned.
what do you mean?
So in the case, like, if you did
such
something so egregious and people in your town, like for instance, the town I grew up in, I won't name it, but you know it well, everybody knows everybody's business, so they wouldn't hold a court case for a prominent figure in my hometown, because it would be a poisoning of the well of the jury pool.
Well, it won't have to be in your hometown. It has to be within the jurisdiction. So, like, that's happening.
And you're aware that the jurisdiction is such a tight-knit community that I can tell you things that are no one should know.
You can move and stay in the same state.
Okay, and now you have
So
a different
what they
judge
couldn't
for a
do
different
is like
circuit,
go to Idaho or something.
and you
Bro,
have a
like,
different judge for a different circuit, and then you could also request a different judge. You literally have 3 things that you can do that you do not have, like, in anarchist society.
I like to go back to our guest.
I was gonna ask, do I need to be here for this?
Yeah,
I'll go back to my comment monitoring.
Okay,
But I just wanted to
well,
make something very clear,
I mean, I don't know this point, but go ahead.
Well, so I mean, I was gonna try to get to, like, it feels like there's a presumption in the anarchist solution here with the arbiter between 2 parties, is that there's this presumption that both parties are gonna honor, you know, the decision of the arbiter.
So remember, so there are pragmatic and principled reasons for anarchy. Like, so, but the reason I'm an anarchist, it is entirely principled, that it is immoral because the relationship between me and government is non-consensual. So saying that, but how do we prevent this bad thing? It doesn't matter. Like, it's not consensual. It's very similar to the argument, for instance, like, think about, like, if you're familiar with the some of the debates that was going on in Congress about whether or not they should free slaves. A lot of times they were arguing that they were uneducated, they didn't have any skills. It's like, what would happen? It doesn't matter. It is immoral. Slavery is immoral. So you have to let them go. The consequences afterwards. Now we could talk about that later.
I mean,
but right now,
you understand
immoral thing. Go ahead.
Well, but I mean, you understand that being an anarchist, I feel like you have to have solutions for common societal, like logistics in society, like for instance, this holding people accountable for their actions, or, you know, providing this arbitration, which I'm perfectly fine if the arbitration is the way that you solve issues between people, because, like, I looked around for potential issues with anarchy. One of the problems that was commonly listed was conflict resolution. How do you resolve conflict between 2 parties? And, you know, one of those solutions is getting a private arbiter and all this other stuff. But I feel like there's this basic assumption that's made that the parties will honor, like, the arbiter's decision. So to contrast this in government now, the way that our government's set up, there's this I guess agreement by continuing to live in American society, that you have to obey the laws of the land.
That's
whether
social
you
contracts. So,
well,
can we go on that?
Well, hold on.
Okay,
Let me finish. Let me finish real quick. So in the American government, you have these, like, social contracts, or you have this understanding to follow the law, or that you have to follow the law. There are entities in place that will force you to follow the law, even if you don't want to follow the law. And so there's this understanding there. So, like, a court case where a decision is where the judge comes to a decision, issues the ruling and everything like that. Like, there are mechanisms in place to actually have all of that followed, right? Or at least ideally. But in anarchy, it kind of seems to me like you have to have the presumption that people will just naturally agree to follow the decision of the arbiter or mediator, and there's just the assumption that that's going to happen. There's no enforcement that it'll happen. There's no repercussions if they don't do it. So it kind of seems like this conflict resolution is solved better by some kind of hierarchical government as opposed to an anarchist type of solution. And so I'm just trying to think outside of, yourself or myself, like, you don't consent to be ruled by the government. Okay. But at the same time, we both benefit from various different things that the government provides. And, living in this society, we definitely benefit. Well, at different ways and at different points in time. But currently, there are benefits that are reaped by everyone by living in our society. Whereas in anarchy, it doesn't seem like that's there. Like there's no there's no benefit to you to working with other people other than you maintain relationships to get shit that you need, and like that's it, I guess. I guess I don't know. I don't know if any of that made sense at all. It just seems like on a government idea, on the idea of a government controlling things, there seems to be more and better mechanisms in place to provide conflict resolution. Whereas in anarchy, there doesn't seem to be a good solution.
Gotcha. I'll try to take notes of what you were saying. So I before we, I want to let's go way back, because you said as an anarchist, I'd have to have ways to address some of the problems that will come about in society, and so I object to that. No, I don't. Just like as an abolitionist, I don't have to have an answer to what we do with free blacks to say that you should free the slaves. I could say, hey, it's immoral, let them go. What do you do afterwards? I don't care. It doesn't matter. You got to let them go. So I don't have to have an answer to that, but I do. So, all right. So first, I think you had pointed out, you said there's a presumption that people are just going to naturally follow rules. So one, that's not necessarily the case. But I mean, there's a presumption that the government is going to cave to the will of the majority, and that doesn't happen. Like the United States and Western Europe, these are all exceptions. If you study government throughout history, that's just it just wasn't happening. The government just went rogue and did whatever it wants to the people, incriminating people for praying to the wrong God and all kinds of crazy stuff. The government, the presumption is that government is going to follow the majority or do what's best for the people, and they often don't. So what I was going to say, the solution to where I lost where I was. The last thing you had said. Oh yeah, well, the government follow rules. So I'm sorry, the presumption was that people were on their own follow rules, and that I think that tends to be kind of what happened, right? So right now, this conversation that we're having, there's no ruler, right? Neither of us have any more authority than the other. I mean, sure, it's me and Facade show, but you can. I mean, nobody's going to mute you or anything. You can just leave, right? But yet we're agreeing to have this productive conversation between us, right? Think about this. Think about any sort of huge company, Apple, Google, Tesla, whatever. Those are all voluntary relationships. Those people, they can just leave whenever they want. There's no one forcing them to do. They're not forcing the engineers to go and make stuff. They're doing things because the relationship exists because there's a mutual benefit. As long as that exists, people are going to tend to work together voluntarily. There's no need to use government to force people to do something that's mutually beneficial.
I mean, as long as you haven't signed an agreement with your employer, because I mean, if you sign an agreement with your employer and then you breach that, then there could be repercussions for not doing your job.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. That's all consensual, but you can't be forced into that contract. And so, if I, but that's not even just with an employee. If I sign a contract with you that I'm going to do something and then I don't do it, then yeah, I mean, as long as the contract is legal, then sure, it can be enforced. But that's what I'm saying. People normally, they just tend to agree to follow the rules because organization works. That's why it doesn't need to be forced. You have a you get on a road. Let's say you get on a road where there aren't like any cops, regulating, giving any tickets. People are going to drive on one particular side because doing something other than that is dangerous. So like you don't need to force people to do something that's mutually beneficial. I'm not saying everybody's going to do. Not everybody's going to follow the rules. There are people that's going to do rogue and make stupid decisions. They're going to do things that's harmful to people. That exists. Like,
but I'm not
arguing for utopia.
Well, I know that you're not arguing for utopia. My argument is that there are better mechanisms in government to accomplish the different logistical things that need to be done for a society than an anarchy does. And I know that earlier you said that you don't have to have any kind of reasons for being an anarchist or anything like that. Well, and I mean, I can agree, but at the same time, if you're going to sit there and try to defend anarchy as a system, like a societal system, then I feel like you do have to have answers.
So what I'm defending is voluntarism.
Okay.
Specifically. So like what I'm saying is whatever system you have, it needs to be voluntary. And in a voluntary society, you could have something that looks very much like a government and operates the same way as long as everybody's consenting to it. Where I object is where the majority makes the rules for everybody else. Then it becomes non-consensual.
So
100 people. I was gonna say, so like, let me just finish this one point. I think this will help. If like my body, since it's mine, it belongs to me, right? I'm the only one that can determine who can use it. Even if there's a million other people who decided to create their own government and vote that they want to give someone else the right to use my body, that doesn't make it moral. You see what I'm saying? Like their government is getting extra rights. How in the name of common sense is, if the government gets its power from the people, how does it have powers that the people don't have? I can't take your property without your consent, yet the government can do it. Why when I do it is it stealing, but when the government does it is moral? Like it makes no sense.
I feel like you're in. I mean, that's not a fair comparison there. Like, if I do it, it's stealing, but if the government does it, it's moral. I don't think that's not necessarily. It's like, well, if I do it, it's stealing. If the government does it, then it's not stealing. That has nothing to do with whether or not the act of stealing is moral or immoral.
Well, sure. Well, when you deal with it, if you take my stuff, it's immoral. When the government does it, somehow it's moral because of social contract, which is what you alluded to earlier. Somehow, by existing in a space that the government has seized for itself, I've now consented to its rule. I did not. Did you want to get on social contract?
Well, like, I feel like how the conversation's going right now is that I bring up an issue that I have with anarchy, and I'm looking for a way that anarchy provides a better or equal solution to a hierarchical government type of society. And then I feel like you come back with just telling me how, well, that's already happening in the hierarchical government society. And then you're not answering my question about anarchy.
Okay,
not all the time.
Let's narrow it down. Let's get real specific. Because like, so I want to say, like, it may sound like I'm doing a 2K fallacy. I'm not. What I'm saying is, if we're going to object to anarchy and say the solution is government, then your solution needs to be capable of solving the problem that you brought up. If it can't, then why bring up government? That's why I'm doing that. I'm not trying to do that.
I understand that, but I'm saying that there are already mechanisms that provide solutions. However, ideally or non-ideally it's implemented in government, the tools are there for it to happen.
Yeah, they currently exist. But like we can talk
Right.
about with slavery. There is already a system in place about what to do with African Americans. If we free them, now we're going to have to figure out stuff. You know, so
Figure what out
well,
at that point.
what do you do? They don't have any education. They don't have any any skills. They don't have any property. You just let them go. So now we're supposed to it was a huge problem. Abraham Lincoln. I don't want to go to a history, but Abraham Lincoln got a bunch of them and shipped them off to Africa. That's how we got Liberia. It was a bunch of nonsense. It's a bunch of logistics that we had to figure out. But it doesn't mean that the right thing to do was to maintain this non-consensual relationship, whether it's with slavery or it's with government.
Okay.
Well, you wanted to get to a specific issue. How about with public schools? We could talk about that. Do you want to talk about how education work? So, with the education system. So obviously, if there's no government, there's no public schools, right? And so the reason I object to public schools is because it is paid for non-consensually, even though it's used for a good thing, but I don't have any say in whether or not I want to pay for it. And so,
I mean, I feel like the consent comes in when you buy a property. There's the understanding that properties are taxed in the city, and those property taxes go to pay for public schools.
That doesn't make it consensual, though.
So I feel like it's is it are you not consenting? Is it not your giving your consent when you buy a house? Are you ever forced to buy a house?
No,
that's never happened to me before.
How about this? Let's say I draw. There's a line in the sand. We go to the beach and draw a line in the sand, and I say, by crossing this line, you're consenting to somebody having sex with you, and you cross the line. Did you consent? You chose to cross that line, the line in the sand. You chose to walk across it.
Okay.
Did you consent? Of course not. So if the government arbitrarily makes up a rule to say, if you do this, we're going to do this thing to you.
I mean,
you do that doesn't mean.
Sorry, I'm just processing this right here. If I was looking at you dead in the face and you say cross this line and I'm going to have sex with you, and I didn't want to have sex with you, then I would take a step back. I wouldn't cross the line.
Even if you did cross the line, that you're not consenting. If I say, if you do A, I'm going to do blah 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 to you. Even if you do A on your own volition, that is not consenting to blah blah blah. Just like if you voluntarily choose to cross the line, you're not consenting to sex. Even if I just arbitrarily made up the rule. I'm saying, if you do this, if you cross that line, I'm going to have sex with you. You didn't consent. So me buying a house, knowing that the government is going to do something to me, that's not me consenting to it.
I mean, I feel like if the rules of the society are, if you purchase this property, then you will yearly be taxed, and you want to buy that property, then you're buying the property. Consenting, buying.
You're voluntarily buying a property. Yeah,
right. And part of the rules for owning that property is to pay taxes.
Listen, society, they draw a circle, and they say society is decide if you step in a circle, someone's going to have sex with you. That is the rule. If you step in a circle on your own volition, did you consent?
I mean, I don't know why we're comparing somebody raping me to owning property.
When I want to bring it back because you're saying somebody determines that if you do X, then a thing is going to happen to you. Therefore, if you do X, you consented. That's what your argument is, essentially. And what I'm saying is that is not the case. Even if I do X on my own volition, despite you warning me in advance that you're going to do such and such afterwards, that doesn't mean I consented to it.
I mean, I'm kind of we're at the point. Yeah, have you ever like repeated a word so many times you fail to understand what the word means anymore? Like what is consent at this point? Because however you communicate consent, I mean, I feel like it's getting blurred in this conversation
Sure.
because I mean, like if I draw a line in the sand and I say, if you cross over here, we gonna have sex. And then you look me dead in the eye and cross over the line, like, I mean, I guess I would expect that you want sex because I'm like, hey, cross the line and
No.
we're having sex.
I can
Like,
tell you, I can say, I'm gonna cross this line. Do not have sex with me. I crossed the
okay,
line.
yeah,
Like,
sure.
I am not
Say,
consenting to the act. Just
I mean, you
just
can
by
say that, but I feel like that's getting into territory that's vastly different than owning property in a city.
but
Like,
what I'm saying is it's not identical, but it's functionally equivalent, is what I'm saying. So with consent, you need permission. In your scenario, you're telling me that if I do X, then you're going to do such and such to me. And now,
Maybe
right?
let's take sex off the table and beach for a second and go with like.
Well, I wasn't saying. I said X. I wasn't saying X.
I know. But we've been talking about forcefully raping people on a beach for a few minutes, and I think we should maybe go to a different scenario.
It's probably not good for the algorithm.
No, probably not. So let's talk about. Let's put this, and I think I'm gonna. If I get your analogy wrong, correct me, Triboulet. But I think I get what your analogy is. Okay. You live in Alabama. I grew up in the South. I know that I have a driveway in my yard in the South. You may have a neighbor, and if you're like me, that neighbor probably lives pretty far away, but they also have a driveway, right? And they have a truck. And they say they're going to park their truck in your driveway. You tell your neighbor that if they park their truck in your driveway, you're going to key their truck. And then you're going to light it on fire. And then your neighbor parks their truck in your driveway. Did they consent to having their truck keyed and lit on fire?
No. That's kind of my point. Like, no, they did not consent to it. That's an arbitrary rule that they define. They're saying if you do an action, we're going to do something to you.
But I mean, laws and property laws are not arbitrary.
Well,
like that,
well,
and
sure
like
they are.
that's arbitrary to suggest that. And but I mean, like property laws. Let's stick with property laws. Property laws are not arbitrary, and I mean, however much you don't like being taxed, that is still like the understanding of it, and that's something that's enforced by the government. Like if that guy had legal standing to key and firebomb your car, then yeah, nothing would happen to him. But
that's not consent.
Even
if he had the legal authority to do it, like, it's not consent.
I mean, I mean, I get that. But
well, yeah, that's what I was talking about. So when we go back to like the real estate, when we're saying if you buy property, like if I buy a house, if I buy property, I'm not consenting to a property tax just because I bought the property.
But no, so let's try to rephrase this, a little bit so that it's more of like consequent. I guess a little bit more in line with how I understand the property tax situation. So, like for instance, there's a law that you can't park like in front of a fire hose, or not fire hose, but fire hydrant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're told, don't park in front of the fire hydrant. We will break your windows or we'll destroy your car in some kind of way. Yeah. So the person parks in front of it. Now they didn't give consent for them to break the windows, but there's this understanding as far as like, parking in front of a fire hydrant goes, that the fire department needs to get to the fire hydrant and they will get to it however they need to. And if that means firebombing your truck or throwing the hose through your windows, then I mean they're going to do that. So that understanding exists, just like with property taxes. The understanding already exists and is enforced by the society that you're going to pay property taxes.
Yeah,
Now
I'm not
that's
objecting to
different.
the
That's a different.
understanding though. I'm objecting
I
to whether
understand
it's
that.
essential. It's not.
I understand that, but my point is that in this hierarchical government that we're talking about here, there's a fundamental understanding of the laws that exist and the consequences of those laws. And I guess in the hierarchical government, it doesn't matter whether or not you consent to being put in jail for 10 years for the crime you commit. Like, I feel like as far as this civil repercussion, or crap, I forgot the exact phrase that's used, the conflict resolution,
Yeah.
or whatever. I feel like at that point, like, the consent of the individuals is not necessarily at the highest priority.
Oh yeah, it still is. So because
I disagree.
Yeah, no. Well, I can show you. I can show you a voluntary criminal justice system. So, because like
Okay.
consent never goes away. So, one voluntary way to do it. It's like you have so let's say somebody commits a rape and you rescind, like now this person has to go away, right? The prison would be voluntary whether or not he wants to go. However, the consequences are social isolation. So this is a one way that it could work. So
I'm sorry, I just have to laugh. It's like,
look,
oh, I'm sorry, you're a serial murderer.
no.
And
No,
the repercussion
I'm
is
sorry. Okay.
you have to leave.
There's a misunderstanding here. All right. So like you still have self-defense. If someone's coming to kill you, you can kill them back. Like you can shoot back. Like that's not the case. Well, let's say somebody commits a crime and you're trying to put them away. So like if they don't go, then it's a social economic isolation. So they don't get to participate in anything in society. You don't buy anything from them. You can't sell anything from them. They can't use any services, any their
Who's going
funds.
to enforce that?
Well, the people would the people voluntarily. Like, so this is, remember, it is, yo, Shannon Q is watching us. That's awesome.
I was actually asking, was it the Shannon Q as we speak?
Oh, okay. What was I about to say? Damn it. I got distracted. Damn. Okay. So what I was going to say, so like, so this person who he can either go and he can either visit this voluntary prison system, or you can just stay away from society altogether. So like you don't get any sort of benefits.
Well, no, from that particular community. Like from that particular like community that they committed the serial murders in, but they could just easily go to another community and keep committing serial murders.
I mean, well, yeah. So like everybody has to be on board, right? Just like in a government system, right? So like
no, not everybody has to be on board in a government system because there are repercussions for it. It's just that there have to be, I guess police officers and everything in order to enforce the laws.
Well, I mean, yeah, everybody doesn't have to be on board for that, but that's not what I was talking about. So like I was going to say that just like in the government systems, there's ways where a guy can escape the criminal justice system. He can flee, or he can just bribe somebody, or just avoid getting caught, or like whatever. So like this isn't a utopian society. What I was just giving to you was not a perfect example. It was a way that you can voluntarily enforce property rights.
Well, yeah, but so here's what's happening in my mind for this particular situation. So you catch a guy who's been serially murdering people for 10 years or something like that. And when you catch him, everybody's like, go to jail. And he's like, no, I'm not going to jail. And they're like, okay, then leave. And then it's like, no, I'm not going to leave. Like, I mean, he doesn't consent to leaving. He doesn't consent to jail. He doesn't consent to leaving. He does consent to just going around and continuing to kill people. So it just
but they're not consent. People aren't consenting to being killed.
So, I mean, I feel like at that point it doesn't matter. If you're putting consent at the very paramount of every single situation, then that person has to consent not only that person's consent is considered when telling them to go to jail, which
Yeah.
is just
Yeah,
laughable,
consent, like
and then
consent never
telling
goes
them to
away.
leave. Well, and
Consent
telling them
never
to leave.
goes.
What happens? So what happens if they don't consent to leaving?
So all right, so think about it. So let's say like you own your home, right? And so you're in your house, you own your property. You are relying on people to voluntarily engage in economic exchanges with you. You need water, right? They don't have to sell that to you. You need electricity, you need internet, you need
No,
food.
I mean, I live in an area where, you know, they like that's part of the building code. So I mean, like
What's part of building
they
code?
definitely have to, huh?
What's part of building code? What specifically? We said.
Well, like, you know, having I mean,
But-
like having facilities and all this other stuff.
No,
I mean,
but what I'm saying is like you would need water, right?
well,
So
right, to which I
so
pay
the
I
water,
pay the utilities.
the water isn't run. So no, but it wouldn't matter. So like in this case, you're a criminal, right? You
Okay.
raped or killed somebody or whatever. So what I was talking about was economic, social isolation. Nobody buys or sells anything to you. No services or goods are provided to you. So like you're in.
Who
Let's say,
enforces that?
well, the people would voluntarily have to engage in it. What
What if the people just don't give a fuck?
Yeah, I mean, like, what if the government that's the same, which happens all the time? That's what I'm saying. Like,
No, I
like,
mean, we're not
there's
talking
always,
about we're
well,
not
there's
talking about
always
our
gonna
government.
be-
We're talking about anarchist society,
yes,
though.
yes, there are always going to be ways that something bad happens and then justice isn't served. So, because you're going down to this what if scenario. Like I like you wanted
Right.
voluntary criminal justice. Like I was giving it to you, and then you add this caveat.
Well, I mean,
what if this
no-
thing? What if this other thing happens? Well, you know,
well, right,
the
because
person might
in
be
my
screwed.
so well, right, but
Mhm.
but here, so on the hierarchical government side, there's a way to force that person to not repent, obviously, but to face repercussions for their actions. They force them to do it against their consent, obviously, but it's because of they're facing repercussions for their actions. The government doles out those repercussions.
Mhm.
And there's like that is dealt with like on the government side, but on anarchist side, if the person committing the murders doesn't consent to jail, again, it's laughable to be like, hey, go to jail. No, I don't want to.
No, well, you
That
got to
seems
consider.
funny.
No, but you got to consider the consequences for not going to jail. Like they're essentially going to be left to the wilderness, like on their own.
I mean,
That's
no.
that's
It
what I'm
doesn't.
talking
It doesn't.
about.
No, I disagree because I mean, you know, they don't consent to going to jail. They don't consent to moving out of the community or leaving the community or whatnot. And then so they're still in the community. It's just that now they got to go on a longer commute to get, you know, like supplies and stuff.
So,
Like,
from who?
who's running the utility
remember,
system in an anarchist society?
Remember, so like they isolate them. So they're saying we're not going to serve you. No service. You want electricity? Sorry, buddy. If you want your electricity,
Who's
you're going to have to go to jail.
electricity?
Well, right now the government.
No, I'm talking about an anarchist society. Who's providing the utilities, the electricity, the internet? Like who's providing all of that?
I mean, like the free market would provide that. So right now it's built. Right now, all of that stuff is built and maintained. I mean, it's built by the free market, and this is maintained by the government. Like the government, doesn't build roads. They don't build tanks. They don't build.
Under that understanding, the free market. What is the free market motivation to cut off the electricity to somebody that's paying them for electricity?
So because like this person is a murderer, and so if you
companies don't give a fuck about that.
Well, yeah, because
you could be a murderer and pay your light bill.
I don't want murder
lights.
Like so, the incentive is that I don't want murderers running free. So if I don't do my part,
companies don't like the free market does not care about that.
They do all the time. You know how the Redskins changed their name? You know why they changed their name to the Commanders?
I mean, I know that they did, and it's
It was
because
the
of social backlash.
it was the free market. Yeah, there was organizations that voluntarily decided we're going to disassociate from you unless you change your name. Like that's powerful, and that's nowhere near on par to what I was
Well, no,
what I
no,
was
no.
talking about.
So, I
'Cause they
mean,
still get to
what,
eat.
no, hold on. Well, while true, that particular interaction is a little bit different because you've got, people like advertisers that are paying them to do it, and of course they're choosing not to pay them to do that. What we're talking about in this situation is somebody providing something, and a murderer wants to buy that thing from them. They're going to turn the murderer away from purchasing, like from getting their money. Like
Would you?
I just don't see that happening in a free
Would you?
market. Huh?
Would you? Would you?
That doesn't matter. It doesn't
I'm
matter if I
but it
would or
does
not.
matter because when we're talking about what
No,
people
no,
would do,
it doesn't.
you're
No,
a
it
software
doesn't.
engineer. I'm a murderer.
I
I want
understand.
somebody to write code for me to help me do something. Are you going to help me?
I mean, I don't have a software engineering business, so
Well,
I mean,
okay, but but you have the skills. Like, are you going to help me?
okay. I mean, probably not. I'm busy with other things. But I mean, that's
really,
not because you're a
really, is
murderer.
that why you wouldn't help me because you're busy? I'm
It
a
doesn't
murderer
matter whether
on
or
the
not
loose.
I
I
would
kill
help
people.
you.
Okay,
What we're
but
talking about are big. Hold on. What we're
what we're
talking
talking about is
about
what
here.
people would do.
No, in your particular analogy there, you're talking about what this huge business would do. Now, if the Washington Commanders stayed the Redskins, do you think that people like would still buy tickets to their games?
Well, yeah, but it'd be very difficult,
Yeah.
right? Well,
I don't think it would be
sure.
difficult at all. I think that they would
It'd be
probably
difficult.
garner a new entire like demographic of people that would want to come and watch their games. I mean,
Except they would have
what
to
would they?
they would
Huh?
have to face like these social pressure that this new business will come in with the understanding of knowing why their previous sponsors left them because of blatant racist names for their football team, the
Okay.
logos and everything. And so now they have to risk public opinion, which is huge. You're talking about in the free market, that can ruin the business doing something like that. And so that now they're going to have to step in and in those shoes, despite what the public thinks about them, and help. So like to me, that is a great incentive. It's not a guarantee. You can definitely have people to be like, you know what? I don't care what anybody thinks. I don't care what happens to my business. I'm going to support the Redskins game, regardless.
I believe we have been going for like an hour and a half. I think maybe.
Give you last word. It's 11:02. I appreciate you, man.
I appreciate having this discussion. But I feel like the main crux for me as far as Anarchy goes, and why I don't think that it's all that particularly viable, regardless of how I morally feel about it. I feel like the underlining presumption is this cohesive agreement between individuals in a community or society, larger society. And you have to, like, there has to be this underpinning agreement that certain things will occur if this person refuses to give their consent for certain things. In this case, like serial murderer, they get ostracized by their community and they're not able to get anything.
Not the community, but like just society, like all of the society. That's what I was saying. That you couldn't just go to,
I mean,
like,
for as far as I understand it, with Anarchy, it wouldn't be like, it wouldn't even be as big as states. Like, it would be individual cities that would implement their own anarchist sort of society, and the people in the city would rule, or maybe even smaller like groups within a city or something like that. Like it could be Anarchy has a scalability problem.
No, it could be as small or as big as you like, long as it's consensual. Like, long as everybody's consensual. Like, the main idea is that majority or super majority can't make the rules for everybody else. Like, not over their property.
Maybe we can go out on this. Like, going back to the sex option that I know that people like talking about. If one person over here is consenting to sex, but this other person over here is not consenting to sex.
That sounds like a rape.
I was trying not to say the word.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry.
But So you're gonna have to violate somebody's consent in that situation. I feel like under your idea,
I
there's
can't. No. I can't consent to you. Like I can't consent to you. I can't give consent for you. But yes, you can.
I understand that.
Mhm.
I understand that, but I'm saying that in that situation, somebody's consent is gonna get violated in that particular, because this person over here,
I got what you're saying. You're saying because let's say I don't want sex, but this other person does want it, right? And so I don't want to prove it. No, so yeah, you still have self-defense. Like all of that's still a possibility. So like self-defense,
but you're still having like somebody's consent or lack of consent is having to be denied in that situation.
Well, we wouldn't. So they're consenting. They can only give consent about what they want to do with their property. They can't give consent about other people's property. So like I can consensually allow people to have sex with me. I can't consensually allow them to have sex with you. That's just the rate.
Well, I mean, I
consent.
understand. No, I mean, I understand how consent works. My point is that if you're building a society built upon primarily consent in all areas, then I feel like you have kind of a conundrum there with one person that does consent and one person that doesn't consent. And because you're either going to have to ignore this person's consent, which I don't know, like if you're putting consent at the paramount of everything, I don't see, like, I don't know how that would be handled. But if like this person over here doesn't consent, like you're going to have to value one person's consent over another.
No, so in intrinsic and consent, what's required, a prerequisite for consent is ownership. So like I can't consent to someone else driving your car. Like that, I didn't give that consent. I wasn't
saying I wasn't saying
that's what I was saying. So if the person is saying they want to have sex with me and I don't want that, they can't decide that I'm going to have consent for them. And if me stopping them from having sex with me is not violating their consent.
I mean, you're denying their consent.
No, they have consent. They have consent over their body. So remember, a prerequisite for consent is ownership. You need to have the authority to make that decision in the first place. Otherwise, you didn't consent.
I mean, I understand that, but still, that's what I'm saying. Denying their consent.
No, how about denying their consent? They have no authority over my body. They have to consent over their body, not mine.
Right. So their consent is to have, like, they're giving consent to have sex with them, but you're not giving consent to it, and so you're denying their, like you're having to deny.
No, I'm not denying their consent. I'm not denying their consent. Like I'm denying their initiation of force on me. I'm just saying, no, you can't do that to me. I know it's late. I'm going to give you your last word. I'm going to give you the last word. It's late, but I don't want to hold you off, because you were gracious enough to come on the show, and I appreciate that.
No, I mean, I appreciate it. I like having, these kinds of chats where we can, we can discuss a lot of things. So basically, I mean, I'm obviously still not convinced of an anarchist society being like a better society than our current government, like hierarchical society or any like hierarchical society. But I do feel like anarchy has a problem with scale, a problem with conflict resolution, and some of these things are not something that we got into. I was hoping to, but we kind of got stuck on a few things. But like, there's a problem with defending your anarchist society, and there's a problem with the internal motivation within the society.
Triboulet, shut up! It's last word.
All right. Yeah, right.
You don't get one. By the way, that's it. The nice thing about giving the guest the last word is that you don't get another one. So, Godless Engineer, please continue.
I mean, those are things I'm interested in learning more in, and I'm always continuing to learn things. I'd be totally okay with coming on again sometime in the future to have more discussions on this. But I do feel like there's a number of problems in anarchy, and but I'll keep learning, and maybe we can have another chat sometime in the future.
Definitely, man. I appreciate you for coming on, bro. Appreciate
really,
it.
really do appreciate you coming on. Thank you for spending some time with us. Shannon Q and I saw quite a few others in the chat. Shannon Q specifically, and then I saw Caitlin Chloe. She
My,
was in the chat as well. Was anyone else?
yeah.
Just wanted to say hi to everyone. And anything you wanted to plug before you go. Thank you guys for chiming in on chat. I tried to keep up with you guys on my personal one and just kind of listening in as well. But anything you wanted to plug or anything you want to say to the audience before we sign off?
Well, I mean, I've always got videos coming out. Tomorrow, I have a video coming out about a guy that hopes to refute atheism and naturalism. So we're going to be exploring like his ideas and how those things are insufficient. And yeah, other than that, I've got a live stream this Friday. I always do a live stream this Friday. I'm apparently competing with many other people for the Friday night live spots. So I'll still be doing my live stream on Friday. Other than that, I just I have different things coming out. I never know what I'm about to do next.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I know our channel is tiny comparatively, but please go check Godless Engineer out. Give him a like, a subscription. I assure you that both Triboulet and I will be tuning in probably to your live. We definitely watch a lot of your videos and after the fact. So I really appreciate you coming on. Hope you have a wonderful evening, guys. We're signing off.